Fidelity Investments recently estimated that the average single retiree will spend over $172,000 on healthcare costs in retirement, and that's before you factor in long-term care. Now, for couples, that burden is at least shared, but retiring alone asks a peculiar kind of courage, not the courage of someone with nothing to lose, but of someone who has everything to protect, and who by necessity must do so entirely on their own. And that is exactly who this video is for. My name is John Norberg. I'm a certified financial planner and I run Norberg Wealth Management, where I specialize in helping people navigate the financial complexities of retirement, and healthcare is one of the most consequential pieces of that puzzle. And in today's video, we're going to walk through 4 things that every pre-retiree, especially single pre-retirees, need to understand about healthcare costs in retirement. And with that introduction, I'd like to welcome you to this latest edition of the Financial Prof series. Alright, so let's get right into it. Pillar number 1, the gap between your last paycheck and Medicare. Now, I want to tell you about a client of mine. I'll call her Margaret and I'll change a few details to protect her privacy, but she came to me at 62, sharp, disciplined, with a well-funded retirement account and a clear sense of what she wanted her retirement to look like. She had saved diligently, paid off her home, and had a relatively modest lifestyle with no debt to speak of, and she had decided that she was ready to retire. What she had yet to plan around, however, was this. Medicare doesn't begin until age 65, and at 62, she was staring at 3 years of healthcare coverage that she would need to purchase entirely on her own, with no employer plan, no spouse's plan to fall back on, and no federal coverage waiting in the wings to rescue. Now, the Affordable Care Act, or ACA, marketplace, what most people call Obamacare, or again, you might have heard ACA, the acronym, does provide an option here, and for many early retirees, it's a genuinely viable one. But there are a few things you need to understand about how it works in 2026, specifically because the rules have changed meaningfully in recent times. One of the things that has happened is that from 2021 through 2025, the federal government offered what are called enhanced subsidies, which made healthcare marketplace coverage a significantly more affordable option for a wide range of income levels. However, those enhanced subsidies expired at the end of 2025. As things stand right now, as of this filming in April of 2026, the subsidy cliff has returned. Very important to know what that means. From a practical level, that means that ACA subsidies in 2026 are available to single individuals with income between roughly $15,650 and $62,600 per year. And if your income crosses that upper threshold by even $1, you lose the subsidy entirely. Not partially, entirely. Now, it is possible that Congress may yet act on the ACA subsidy situation, and again, because of the filming timing of this video, I would encourage you to check for any legislative updates. This is a fast-moving issue, and it is possible that it may have changed by the time you're watching this. But again, as of right now, that's how things stand. Because, and I want to stress this, because this is where income planning becomes critically important for early retirees. Because in retirement, income is something that you largely control. You're not receiving a paycheck, you're deciding rather how much to draw from and from which accounts and when. Now, with a little strategic sequencing, such as we talked about in one of our recent videos on your tax situation in retirement, many single early retirees can manage their income deliberately enough to stay within that subsidy window, which would potentially save them thousands of dollars per year in healthcare premiums. So let me give you a quick example here. If you, like Margaret, have both pre-tax accounts like a traditional IRA or 401k and tax-free accounts like a Roth IRA, drawing from your Roth during your early retirement years doesn't count as income for ACA purposes. Now, this means you could potentially fund your lifestyle from Roth withdrawals, keep your reportable income low, and qualify for meaningful marketplace subsidies, all while Medicare is still a few years away. The strategic takeaway from this first pillar is this, that the gap between your last paycheck and Medicare is real, and it can be costly, and it is also plannable, but only if you see it coming. You see, the best time to think about this is not when you're 64 and 3 months away from retirement. It's now, while you still have time to structure things thoughtfully, while you can still make the changes that are necessary to stay within those bracket limits. because if you can, again, this could mean the difference between thousands of dollars over the course of an entire retirement, tens of thousands of dollars, and accounting for inflation, possibly even hundreds of thousands of dollars in difference of your healthcare costs. All right. So, with that being said, let's talk about Pillar 2, because even once you do get to Medicare, it's not necessarily the finish line you think it is. So, what's the second pillar? That Medicare is the beginning, not the end. You see, there's a deeply human tendency to treat certain milestones as finish lines. We do it with birthdays, with job titles, with savings balances. And a great many people treat Medicare eligibility in much the same way, as the moment when health care, as a question, finally gets answered. But it doesn't, and for single retirees, the ways in which Medicare falls short are well worth understanding in detail. So let's start with the basics. What Medicare will actually cover. Medicare Part A covers hospital care, quite simply. Part B covers outpatient services, doctor visits, and medical equipment. Medicare Part D covers prescription drugs. Now, there's also Medicare Advantage, which is sometimes called Part C, and it packages these together through private insurers and often includes additional benefits. You may have even started receiving phone calls from some of these folks if you're at a certain age where you're getting ready to begin Medicare. Now, together, these do form a fairly solid foundation. But Medicare does not cover a number of different other things that most people are going to want in retirement. For instance, dental care. It does not cover. It does not cover vision. And it doesn't cover hearing aids. And as we'll discuss in a moment, it certainly does not cover long-term care. Now, the standard Part B premium this year is $202.90 per month. For many people, that's the number they're planning around. But there's a surcharge that catches a lot of people off guard, and I see it way too many times to count in my practice. It's something that, especially if you've done or considered doing Roth conversions, can throw you into a whole different bracket when it comes to your Medicare amount. It's called IRMA, the Income Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. And what it means is that if your income exceeds certain thresholds, you pay significantly more for your Medicare. In 2026, IRMA kicks in for single filers with income above $109,000. Of course, if you're married, that's $218K. At that threshold, though, your Part B premium as a single individual would jump from $202.90 to $284.10 per month, a substantial climb. And it continues to climb from there, all the way to $689.90 per month at the highest income levels. And here's the part that often surprises people, particularly those who have been used to thinking in terms of household income. The IRMA thresholds for single filers are not simply half of what they are for married couples. Now, a married couple can have combined income of $218,000 and pay the standard of $202.90 each. A single person with $109,001 has already crossed into surcharge territory. Dollar for dollar, Medicare can cost a single high-income retiree meaningfully more than it costs each member of a couple with the same individual income. Now, there's also a timing wrinkle that's worth knowing about, and this is particularly important if you're getting ready to claim Medicare. IRMA is calculated using your income from 2 years prior, so your 2026 Medicare premiums are based on what you reported on your 2024 taxes. If you had a high income year in 2024, maybe a large Roth conversion, a business sale, or a significant capital gain from good investments, you may be paying elevated Medicare premiums in 2026, even if your actual retirement income is now much lower. This is something a good planner should be modeling out well in advance, and why it can be worth working with a good financial advisor even before you hit that Medicare/retirement phase. Now, the practical upshot of all of this is rather straightforward, and it's this. Medicare is not a fixed cost. It's a variable cost that responds to your income. And with thoughtful income management, you can influence what you pay. It's not a loophole. It's exactly what the system is designed to reward when people plan well. But especially if you've got other income puzzle pieces that are part of the jigsaw of your retirement, be it Roth conversions, be it charitable donations, a business sale, what have you. It's very important to understand how all of these work together. All right. So with that being the second pillar, let's talk a little bit about Pillar 3, because this is a huge secret weapon in a retiree's arsenal. And what's Pillar 3? The HSA, the single most underused tool in a single pre-retiree's arsenal. Now, before we get to this, and I do want to be clear, this is one of the ones that I think carries the most financial consequence of pretty much anything we'll discuss today. I do want to make sure that we cover something that most single pre-retirees are either dramatically underusing or ignoring altogether. Because it is a tool which is available to you right now while you're still working, and the window to use it is closing, whether you act on it or not. And if you've heard of it, chances are you might not have heard of a few recent changes that just got signed into law. So, listen in. The tool, of course, as I've already revealed, is the HSA or Health Savings Account. And if you're not maximizing yours, I'd encourage you to treat what I'm about to say as one of the most actionable things in the entirety of this video. Here is what makes an HSA unlike any other account in your financial life. It carries what's sometimes called a triple threat, or a triple tax advantage, if you will, right? This is by which I mean to say contributions go in pre-tax, reducing your taxable income today. And then that money grows tax-free inside the account. So that's two tax advantages. And then thirdly, when you withdraw it for qualified medical expenses, you pay no tax on the way out either. No other account in the entire tax code gives you all three of those features simultaneously. A traditional IRA will give you the deduction going in, but taxes you on the way out. A Roth gives you tax-free growth and withdrawal, but no deduction going in. The HSA is genuinely, in a case, all its own. Highly encourage you to consider it if you haven't, and if you have, well, let's talk about what you can do with it. For 2026, if you're covered by an HSA-eligible high-deductible health plan, you can contribute up to $4,400 as a single individual. And if you're 55 or older, which probably describes the majority of people watching this video, you can add another $1,000 as a catch-up contribution, bringing your total to $5,400 per year. Now, there is something worth noting about 2026 specifically, because the rules have actually expanded in a meaningful way in very recent times. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBA, as you've probably heard it referred to, which was signed into law in July of 2025, made some of the most significant changes to HSA eligibility in over 2 decades. Starting this year, bronze and catastrophic plans on the ACA marketplace are now HSA compatible. This matters enormously for the pre-retirees we discussed in Pillar 1. Those are the ones who are navigating that coverage gap before Medicare. Previously, if you retired early and bought a marketplace plan, you likely couldn't contribute to your HSA. But in 2026, if you've chosen a bronze plan, that door is now open. This is going to affect a huge swath of pre-retirees and retirees who may not have any idea that it's even the case. So if you or a friend is in this situation and say you have a bronze plan, I would highly encourage you to consider an HSA. But here's the deeper strategic point, and it is the one that I most want you to internalize. The HSA is not just a healthcare spending account. It's a retirement healthcare savings vehicle. And for single pre-retirees still working, it represents a finite and a quickly closing window. Think about it this way. Every dollar that you contribute to your HSA today and don't spend grows tax-free for use in retirement. You can invest the funds. Most HSA custodians offer investment options, not dissimilar from your 401k, and let the balance compound over the years between now and Medicare. And then once you've retired and you're facing those costs that we've discussed throughout this video, Medicare premiums, IRMAA surcharges, dental, vision, long-term care insurance premiums, health care in general, it costs money to stay healthy often, you can draw from your HSA tax-free to cover those costs. And the window closes the moment that you enroll in Medicare. The day you sign up for Medicare Part A, your HSA contribution eligibility ends. You can still spend the money already in the account, but you can no longer add to it. For a 60-year-old who has 5 years before they're Medicare eligible, that's potentially $27,000 in additional contributions, $47,000 with catch-up, that are simply left on the table that if they're not acting with intention. Now, Fidelity's most recent research found that only 15% of people aged 55 to 64 have an HSA, and of those who do, more than half don't realize that it can be used as a retirement savings vehicle. For single pre-retirees in particular, this gap in awareness can be costly. And the takeaway is simply this. If you have access to an HSA-eligible plan, consider contributing the maximum. Invest the funds. Don't treat it as a debit card for your current medical expenses unless you absolutely need to. Rather, let it grow. And when you arrive at retirement, you'll have a dedicated, tax-advantaged reserve for the exact costs that tend to surprise people the most. And as a famous wise man once observed, if you haven't got your health, you haven't got anything. All right, Now, having talked about HSAs, I do want to talk about one more thing, our fourth pillar here. And again, this is probably one of the most powerful and impactful things that people often don't consider in their retirement picture until it's too late. So, pillar four, let me return for a moment to where we started, to that idea of peculiar courage. Because what I've noticed after years of working with single pre retirees is that most of them are genuinely prepared for retirement, facing its ordinary challenges alone. And they made peace with the fact that they'll be making decisions without a partner's input, managing their finances without a second income, navigating the season of life with independence and self reliance. That doesn't frighten them. But what can be frightening or unexpected or completely unknowable is when they really sit with it. The single pre-retirees that I work with and retirees. What happens if I can no longer take care of myself? And who carries that weight with me? And that's why pillar number four is the long-term care question. And that question is categorically different for single retirees. And it's why I'm going to spend some time here. Here's what the data tells us. According to the Administration for Community Living, a person turning 65 today has roughly a 70% chance of needing some form of long-term care during their lifetime. It's not a small probability. And most people think, oh, I'll be part of the 30%. But statistics are statistics and can't be argued with. It's not a tail risk, it's a planning assumption. And what those who need care actually require on average, if you didn't know, is about 3 years or so of care, right? 3 years of long term care is about the average. Now, here's where being single changes that calculus entirely. For couples, there is typically an informal first line of care, a spouse. It might not be ideal, it might not be professional, and it does place its own burdens on the caregiver. But for the early stages of declining function, a spouse often absorbs a meaningful amount of that need at little or no financial cost. Single retirees don't have that buffer. The financial clock on paid care starts earlier and it runs longer. So, what does that care actually cost? Well, according to Genworth's 2025 Cost of Care Survey, the median national cost of assisted living in 2026 is approximately $5,900 per month. A private room, however, in a nursing home runs around $10,965 per month. Even home-based care, which most people tend to prefer, averages around $6,500 per month for full-time help. Now, at those numbers, a single year of care can cost anywhere from $70,000 to over $130,000. 3 years, the average need, takes that to a range of $200,000 to $400,000 or more, depending on the level and the setting of care, not to mention factors such as inflation. Now, here's what I find to be the most important thing to understand about all of this, which is that Medicare covers almost none of it. Medicare will pay for short-term skilled nursing care following a hospitalization, but it doesn't cover custodial care, the kind of ongoing assistance with daily activities that most people who need long-term care actually require. People are routinely surprised to discover this, often at the worst possible moment. Well, so now that we know the problem, what do we do about it? Well, there are essentially three different approaches, and the good news is they're not mutually exclusive. In fact, they can oftentimes work in tandem with each other. The first option is self-insurance. If you have substantial assets, we're generally speaking of investable portfolios in the range of $3 million or more, it may be reasonable to earmark a portion of those assets for potential long-term care costs and plan around a worst-case scenario. This approach tends to work best for people who have genuinely stress-tested the numbers, not just those who feel wealthy enough that the problem seems distant. I mean, actually sat down, plotted out those costs, and figured out when and where and how they're going to pay for those costs. Now, the second option is traditional long-term care insurance. This is an insurance product that has changed dramatically over the past 15 years. Many of the large insurers have completely exited the market. Premiums have risen considerably, and policies are more limited than they once were, as insurance companies have figured out just how expensive this space can be. But for the right person, which is typically someone in their mid-50s to maybe 60s in reasonably good health, a traditional long-term care policy can provide meaningful protection at a manageable cost. The critical thing to know is that premiums do rise with age and health changes. Waiting tends to mean paying more, qualifying for less, or finding yourself unable to qualify at all. Now, the third path, and the one that I find many of my clients gravitating towards, is a hybrid policy. These products combine a life insurance death benefit or an annuity with a long-term care rider. And the appeal is straightforward. If you need the care, the policy pays for it. If you don't, the death benefit passes to your estate or beneficiaries. Nothing is wasted. These products tend to be funded with a lump sum or a shorter payment period, say 6 to 10 years or so, and they've grown considerably in popularity as the traditional long-term care market has contracted. And the beauty is that some of these policies also cover in-home care on an indemnification basis. I want to repeat what that means. Indemnification, meaning no receipts to reimburse. As long as you meet the qualifications, you can pull the money out tax-free and use it to pay for whatever you need. And because these are hybrid policies, the leverage on your initial premium can be substantial. Depending on age and health, you could potentially be eligible for $300,000 in long-term care benefits for a $100,000 one-time premium. To put it a bit more philosophically, Aristotle, in his treatment of the virtues, described prudence, what the Greeks called phronesis, as the capacity to see clearly what a situation actually demands, rather than what we might wish it demanded. And so many times I run into people who say, well, if I'm going to be in long-term care, that's it. My long-term care plan is wheel me off the cliff, or perhaps a bit more graphically, a Glock into the woods. That's not realistic. Long-term care planning is an act of this prudence that Aristotle speaks about in exactly that sense. It is not pessimism. It is not dwelling on decline. It is simply seeing the situation for what it is, grasping reality, and responding with the clarity and the foresight that your future self will be deeply grateful for. If I could leave you with one thought on this particular topic, one which I'm passionate about because I've seen it, unfortunately, affect my own family in multiple cases, that thought would be this, that the time to address long-term care is before you need it, before your health changes, before your options narrow, before the cost of coverage puts certain products completely out of reach. The cost of acting early is almost always significantly lower than the cost of acting late. So, to wrap up, healthcare in retirement is not one problem. It's a series of distinct challenges that arrive at different moments. And for single retirees, each one lands without a partner to help absorb that weight. But that is precisely why the planning matters more, not less. The coverage gap before Medicare is real, and it is plannable. Medicare's true cost, including the income-related surcharges that tend to fall harder on single filers, is manageable too with the right income strategy, and if again you're doing Roth conversions, the right Roth conversion strategy to avoid those kinds of pitfalls. The HSA is a tool you may have been underusing, and the window to maximize it is open right now, but it's not going to stay open indefinitely. And long-term care, the risk most people avoid thinking about, is addressable today while your options are still wide open. So, if you found this video useful, and if you'd like to talk through any of these issues as they apply specifically to your situation, I would welcome that conversation. There's a link in the description to this video where you can book a consultation directly, and I'd be glad to help you build a healthcare strategy that fits the retirement you're working towards. In the meantime, please feel free to subscribe so that you never miss another episode of the Financial Prof series. In the meantime, I'll see you out there.